There is a stone trough behind a farmhouse in Lancaster County that has run with clean, cold water every single day for over 140 years. No pipe runs to it from any town. No pump hums beneath it. No meter ticks somewhere in the dark, counting every gallon and mailing the family a bill at the end of the month. The water simply arrives. Quietly. Faithfully. The way it has since before the first electric line was ever strung across that valley. I stood beside it last spring, and I cupped my hands, and I drank from it, cold enough to ache my teeth in April. And the old man who owns that farm looked at me, and he said something I have not been able to set down since. He said, "The English pay every month for the one thing the good Lord already sends down out of the sky for free." After my last video, hundreds of you wrote me the very same question. You said, "Amos, the heat is fine, the cooling is fine, but what happens when the water stops? When the well pump has no power? When the town closes the valve? When the tap in your kitchen runs dry and there is nothing standing behind it? What then? What does a family do then?" So I spent the whole winter writing it all down. Every system the plain people use to pull water out of the sky, up out of the ground, and even uphill, with no electricity at all. 8 of them. And before this video is over, I am going to show you the one system that was actually against the law in this country until the year 2016. Against the law to catch the rain that fell on your own roof, onto your own land. I will show you who made it illegal, and I will show you exactly why. Stay with me, because that last part will change how you see your water bill forever. Let me start with the number, because the number is what changed my own mind. The average American home pays for its water twice, once to the utility that pipes it in through the wall and once again, hidden inside the electric bill, to run the pump and the heater that push it through the house. Then a great many families pay for it a third time at the store by the bottle. Americans now spend tens of billions of dollars a year on water in plastic bottles. Water. The same water that falls on the roof for nothing. We have been turned into customers for rain. And here is the part that should trouble you. Cut the power to a modern house and most of them lose their water inside of a single day. Not because the water is gone. The water is still right there. It is in the ground beneath your feet. It is in the clouds over your head. It is in the creek at the bottom of the hill, running away from you this very minute. You have simply been taught, carefully and over a long time, to believe you cannot reach a drop of it without permission and without a bill. The plain people never accepted that bargain. A man my grandfather knew kept his whole family in clean water straight through the Depression, through 2 long droughts, and through one winter so hard the pipes froze solid in every English house up and down that road. He used no electricity, not one wire. He used gravity and stone and sand, and a few simple machines that have not changed in 200 years and do not need to. Those are the 8 systems. Let me hand them to you in order, from the one above your head right now to the one they buried. The first system is the simplest of all, and it is sitting directly over you as you listen. Your roof. A roof is a rain-catching machine you have already paid for, and most of you let every single drop run off it, down the gutter and into the street. Here is the arithmetic, and it stopped me cold the first time I worked it out with a pencil. 1 inch of rain, falling on 1,000 square feet of roof, gives you 620 gallons of water. 620 gallons. From a single inch of rain. A modest barn roof, in an ordinary year, will shed tens of thousands of gallons that you are presently throwing away into the gutter. This is not a new idea. It is one of the oldest there is. The Romans built their houses around it. In the heart of a Roman home was an opening in the roof and a shallow basin beneath it called the impluvium, set there for the one purpose of catching the rain and guiding it down into a cistern below the floor. 2,000 years ago, the most powerful city on earth caught its rain off the roof on purpose. We are the strange ones for having stopped. The system itself is called a catchment, and it is plain. Gutters along the eave, a downspout, a screen to keep the leaves out, and then one piece almost everyone leaves off, which is the very piece that makes the whole thing work. It is called a first flush diverter. The first rain to come off any roof carries the dust, the bird droppings, the pollen, the leaf rot, all of it washed down at once. The diverter is nothing but a simple standpipe that fills up first and swallows that dirty first wash, and only once it is full does the clean water that follows run on past it and into your tank. A few dollars of pipe. No power. No moving part but a floating ball. And it is the whole difference between water you can use and water you would not give to an animal. The second system is where all that caught water goes, and it is older even than the roof above it. The cistern. A cistern is nothing more than a tank built to hold the rain until the day you need it, and men have been building them out of stone for thousands of years. Beneath the city of Istanbul, there is a Roman cistern with marble columns, built in the 6th century, that could hold millions of gallons. The word itself is older than English. But the Amish build theirs with a simple genius the Romans would have nodded at. They build it below the frost line, down in the ground, lined with ferrocement or with food-grade poly, and that placement underground is the entire secret of it. Think about what the ground does for the water. Down below the frost line, the water sits at the steady, cool temperature of the earth itself. It never freezes solid in January. It never grows warm and green and foul in July. It stays cool and dark and still all year round, and cool and dark and still is exactly what water wants in order to stay clean and sweet. A family cistern of 2,000 or 3,000 gallons will carry a household through weeks of dry weather with ease. You fill it from the roof in the wet months, you draw it down in the dry ones, and in doing that you have quietly broken the one rule the whole utility depends on. The rule that says you must take your water the very moment they decide to sell it to you, at the price they decide to charge. A cistern lets you take it on your own time, at no price at all. That is not a small thing. That is independence, sitting buried in the ground where no man and no company can ever shut it off. And the cost of it is almost nothing, set against a whole lifetime of water bills. A buried food-grade poly tank and the pipe to feed it can be had for a few $100s, and the man who pours his own ferrocement by hand spends even less than that. You build it one time. It serves you and your family for the rest of your natural life. The third system goes the other direction entirely, down into the ground after the water that is already waiting there. The hand-dug well and the pump that has stood on top of wells like it since long before your great-grandfather drew his first breath. The pitcher pump. You have seen one. The cast-iron pump with the long curved handle and the spout, the one the English now buy to put flowers in. It was never a decoration. It is a working machine, and it is beautiful in how little it asks of you. You pour a cup of water in the top to wet the leather seal, what the old men call priming it. You work the handle up and down, and a column of cold water rises up out of the earth and pours into your bucket. No electricity. No motor to burn out in a storm. Nothing in it to fail when the grid does. There is a limit to it, and I will be honest about the limit. A pitcher pump like that lifts water from about 25 feet down, no deeper, because it pulls the water up by suction, and suction simply cannot reach past so far. For water that lies deeper, the plain people use a different hand pump, a deep well pump, that drops a long rod and a cylinder down past 100 feet into the well and lifts the water up mechanically on the rod, not by suction at all. There are good ones made yet today that a strong child can work. Either way, the principle is the very same one their grandfathers trusted. The water in the ground belongs to the man standing over it, and he needs no wire running to his house to bring it up into the light. The fourth system is the one I love the best of all 8, because in this one the land itself does nearly all the labor, and you do almost none. The spring. If you have so much as a hillside on your property, you may already own a vein of clean, moving water and not even know it is there. A spring is simply groundwater finding its own way back to the surface, pushed up and out by the weight of the whole hill standing behind it. The plain people do not let a gift like that run off and lose itself in the mud at the bottom of the slope. They develop it. They build what is called a spring box. A spring box is a small, sealed chamber, made of stone or of concrete, set right into the hillside at the very spot where the water comes out of the ground. It catches the water clean at its source, before it has the chance to touch the open air and the open dirt, and it keeps the leaves and the animals and the surface runoff out of it. There's a screened overflow so it never bursts, and from the bottom of the box a single buried pipe runs downhill toward the house. And here is the part that ought to make a modern man set down his coffee cup and sit up straight. If the house sits lower on the hill than the spring does, the water flows all the way to the kitchen tap on gravity alone, on nothing but the patience of the slope. No pump anywhere in it. No power. No bill, not now and not ever. A good developed spring will run day and night, summer and winter, through droughts that empty the neighbor's wells for 100 years. And the only thing it asks of you in return is that you keep the box clean and the screen clear. Unless you think this is only some small Amish notion, dug on one hillside in Pennsylvania, know that the Persians were doing the very same thing 3,000 years ago. In the dry hills of old Persia, men dug long, gently sloping tunnels called qanats, miles of them, all by hand, to carry the groundwater down out of the mountains to their villages and their fields below, moved by the pull of gravity alone, with not one single drop ever pumped. And some of those ancient qanats are still running today, still watering the same fields, 3,000 years on. Gravity does not break down. Gravity does not retire, and it does not send you a bill. It is the oldest and the most faithful machine there has ever been. The fifth system is the one I told you at the start I was saving, and it is the one that sounds flatly impossible right up until the moment you understand it. It moves water uphill, with no electricity, no fuel, no engine, no motor of any kind whatsoever. It runs on nothing in this world but the weight and the motion of the water itself. It is called a hydraulic ram pump, and a Frenchman by the name of Joseph Montgolfier built the first self-acting one in the year 1796. And here is a thing to sit with. That same Montgolfier family had, just a few years before, sent up the very first hot air balloon to carry men into the sky. The same minds that first lifted a man off the ground also handed the common farmer a pump that runs forever and never once plugs into anything. Now let me show you how it works, because it is the cleverest single trick in this entire video, and once you see it you will never forget it. You take a steady fall of water from a creek or a spring sitting above the pump, and you let it rush down a long pipe, the drive pipe, and build up real speed. Then a weighted valve at the bottom suddenly slams shut. Now all of that moving water with all of its built-up speed has nowhere left to go, and that violent stop creates a hard, sharp shock of pressure. You have heard this very thing in your own house. The bang in the pipes when you shut a faucet off too fast. The plumbers call it water hammer, and in your walls it is only a nuisance. But in a ram pump, that water hammer is the engine. That shock of pressure forces a small portion of the water up through a one-way valve, into an air chamber that smooths the push, and on up the hill, far higher than it ever started. Then the valve falls open again, the water rushes down again, and the whole cycle repeats itself, on its own, over and over all day and all night, with no hand ever laid on it. The whole machine has but 2 moving valves in the entire thing, and a handy man can build one from plain fittings off the hardware store shelf for well under $100. 2 valves, no wire, no fuel, and it will go on running for years on end. The rule of thumb is this, and it is an honest one. For every 10 gallons you feed into the ram, only about 1 gallon gets pushed up the hill. The other 9 do the pushing and run back out the bottom and continue on their way downhill. Now that sounds like terrible waste until you remember the simple fact that the water was running downhill and away from you anyway, doing nothing for anyone. A ram pump can lift water more than 100 feet above the creek it sits in, up to a holding tank on a ridge, up to a barn on the high ground, up to a house, and it asks for nothing at all in return. No power bill, no fuel, no attention. These pumps have sat thumping away, day and night, on farms and estates for 2 full centuries, and most people alive in this country today have never once heard the word. That is not an accident of history. Hold on to that because we will come back to it. The 6th system is the one that takes water you would never dare to drink and turns it into water you safely can, and it is so simple and so old that the City of London used this exact method to clean the drinking water for 1 million souls beginning back in the 1800s. It is the slow sand filter, not a plastic cartridge you buy and then throw in the trash and buy again. Sand. Nothing but the right sand in a barrel or a concrete box with the water trickling slowly down through it. And here is the part the men who sell filters will never tell you, because there is no money in the truth of it. The sand itself is not the thing that cleans the water. On the very top inch of that bed of sand, if you let the water flow gently and give it a few weeks, a living layer grows all on its own. The Germans named it long ago. They call it the Schmutzdeck. It means simply the dirt cover. It is a thin film of microscopic living things, and it is alive, and it is hungry. As the water seeps down through it, that living layer eats the bacteria and the parasites right out of the water, the way a pond cleans itself. A well-built and well-tended sand filter removes somewhere between 90 and 99% of the bacteria, and very nearly every parasite, and it does all of that with no power, no chemicals, and no cartridge to ever replace. This is not folklore. The districts of London that filtered their water through sand were the very ones spared in the Great Cholera years, when the unfiltered districts died. And in our own time, a man named David Mance, at a Canadian university, took that 200-year-old idea and shrank it down to a single barrel that sits quiet in a kitchen corner. There are millions of those filters in daily use around the world this very moment, and to build one is no great matter at all. A barrel or a clean drum, a bed of coarse gravel laid in the bottom, a deep bed of fine clean sand above that, a plate on top so the pour of water does not tear up the living skin, and an outlet pipe set so that an inch of water always stands over the sand and the layer never dries out and dies on you. That is the whole of it. Sand, gravel, a barrel, and a little patience. The 7th system is the one that nearly every household on earth wastes, every single day, without ever once stopping to think about it. The water you have already used. When you wash your dishes, when you rinse your garden vegetables, when you take your bath, that water does not simply vanish from the world. It runs down a drain and away, water still clean enough to grow a garden with, and yet we treat it exactly like sewage and send it off to be forgotten. The plain people never built their lives around drains that run to nowhere. They built a different rule in instead, long before it was a fashionable word on anyone's lips: waste nothing. So they catch that gently used water, what the English now call greywater, and they send it right back out to the orchard, and the garden, and the roots of the fruit trees. And if you think this is only some backward old habit, then consider this. The astronauts on the space station, the most advanced machine our nation has ever flown, recover and reuse better than 90% of their water. They drink yesterday's water again today, cleaned and returned, because up there not one drop can be wasted. The Amish reached the same wisdom a great deal sooner, and at a great deal lower cost. A greywater system on a homestead can be as plain as a pipe leading from the wash basin out to a mulched basin dug at the roots of your fruit trees. The soil and the countless tiny creatures living in it finish the cleaning the way the living earth has always done it, and the tree drinks deep of the very water that would otherwise have run down the sewer and been gone. On a working homestead, doing this can cut the fresh water you must draw for the garden very nearly in half. Now I am going to be honest with you about the real limits and the real rules of this one in just a moment, because there are some, but the principle underneath it is sound, and it is ancient. The water that built one thing can be made to build another before you ever let it go. The 8th and final system is the largest of them all, and the slowest, and in some ways it is the most powerful of the 8, because this one does not store its water in any tank or barrel at all. It stores the water in the living land itself. When the rain falls on a sloped field, most of it simply runs off the surface, takes a little of your precious topsoil along with it, and is gone and downstream inside of an afternoon. The plain people and the old careful farmers long before them learned how to stop that running water and make it sink down and stay. They do it with shallow ditches, dug dead level, running along the contour of the slope. They are called swales. A swale catches the rainwater as it runs down the hill and holds it in a long, level, patient line. And instead of rushing on downhill, that caught water sits there, quiet, and soaks straight down into the ground, where it recharges the soil, and the roots, and the very wells far below. Pair your swales with a simple farm pond dug at the low point of the land, to hold whatever overflows in the hardest rains, and you have done something remarkable. You have turned your entire property into a great sponge, one that drinks its fill in the wet season, and then feeds your land slowly back through all the dry months that follow. No tank that money can buy could ever hold as much water as a single acre of ground that has been patiently taught how to drink. Men terraced the hillsides this way thousands of years ago, in lands now turned to desert, and where the terraces still stand, the water still stays. An Australian farmer named Yeomans gave the idea its modern shape, a careful way of plowing and shaping a whole farm so that every rain that falls sinks down into it rather than running off, and farms run on his pattern have ridden out droughts that burned their neighbors to dust. This is the system that outlasts the man who digs it. You dig it once with care, and it goes on quietly working for your children and for theirs. Now, I told you at the very start that one of these 8 was made against the law, and I have saved it for the last, because it is the one that ought to make you genuinely angry. So go all the way back to the very first system, the rainwater coming off your own roof. You would surely think that catching the rain that falls out of the free sky onto your own house, standing on your own land, would be about the most natural and the most basic right a man could ever hold. And for most of this country, thank God, it is, but not everywhere, and not for nearly as long as you would believe. In the state of Colorado, catching that rain was against the law. For generations, under the old water laws of the dry western states, laws they call prior appropriation, the rain that fell upon your own roof was not legally considered to be yours at all. By law, every drop of it had already been promised to the holders of water rights downstream. So if you put a simple barrel beneath your own downspout to catch a little of it, you were, in the cold eyes of the state, stealing water that belonged to somebody else. Colorado stood as the only state in the entire Union to forbid it outright, and it stayed that way, written plainly on the books, until a law was finally passed and took its effect in the year 2016. Within the easy living memory of nearly every single person hearing my voice right now, there was a place in America where catching rainwater in a bucket could bring a hardworking man a fine. And Colorado was not entirely alone in it. Utah, just to the west, kept its own restrictions on collecting rainwater in place until the year 2010. These were not ancient laws, gathering dust, forgotten on some shelf. This was the living law of the land, in the driest and the most self-reliant corner of this whole country, well within the last 15 years. And listen closely, because even now, even after they changed it, that 2016 law lets an ordinary household keep only 2 barrels, 110 gallons all told, and the water you catch may be used outdoors only, on your own garden, never piped inside, never for drinking. That is the short leash they chose to leave on it. Now, I am not telling you any of this to frighten you. I am telling you because it proves, in black and white, in the actual law, the one thing the plain people have always quietly understood in their bones. The very moment you can supply your own water, you stop being a customer. And there is a very great deal of money, and an even greater deal of control, all tied up in the simple business of keeping you a customer. Between the utilities and the bottled water companies and the plumbing codes that in many a town still forbid you to so much as connect your own rain barrel to your own house, there is a whole machine built to keep your hand on their tap. That, and nothing more complicated than that, is the real reason most people have never heard of half the systems in this video. Not because the systems fail. Because they work entirely too well. Now let me be honest with you, plainly, the way I promised at the start, because the breathless videos out there never will be. Not one of these 8 systems is magic, and every single one of them carries a limit that you must respect, or it will fail you. Rainwater straight off a roof is clean enough for the garden and for washing, but if you intend to drink it, you finish it through that sand filter first, and when you are in any doubt at all, you boil it. The sand filter itself needs a few weeks of patient running to grow its living layer before it works at its full strength, and understand clearly that it removes the living things, the bacteria and the parasites, but it does not remove chemicals, and it does not remove salt. The ram pump must have a steady, year-round fall of running water above it. No creek, no spring, no fall, then no ram. It is that simple. And the greywater goes out onto the ground and down into the soil, never into a jar to sit and store, and never sprayed onto the leaves of the food you mean to eat raw. You keep it moving, you keep it below the surface in the mulch, and you follow the rules your own state has set, because some states do indeed have them. Not one of these 8 will let you ignore your water entirely, or stop thinking about it. What they will do is the one thing that truly matters in the end. They put the water back into your own 2 hands. They mean that on the day the power fails, and the pump falls silent, and the valve in town gets quietly closed, your family still drinks, and your garden still grows, and you do not have to ask a single soul on this earth for permission to stay alive. That is the whole of it. 8 systems. The roof that catches, the cistern that holds, the well and its iron hand pump, the spring box on the hill, the ram pump that climbs uphill against all reason, the sand that cleans the water with a living skin, the greywater that feeds the orchard twice, and the swale that turns your bare land itself into a deep and patient well. Not one of the 8 needs the grid. Not one of them mails you a bill. And every last one of them was common, ordinary, grandfather's knowledge on this very continent within the last 100 years, before we were all so quietly and so carefully taught to forget that we ever knew it. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect somebody else's profit, then you already know exactly what to do. This video does not reach the people who truly need it unless you help carry it to them. And I want to hear from you honestly. Down in the comments, tell me this one thing. Where does your water come from right now, today, this minute? And what on earth would you drink tomorrow if the power went out in your house tonight? Be honest with me and be honest with yourself. I read every single comment that comes in, everyone, and I learn as much from you and your country as you ever learn from me. So subscribe and stay close to this channel, because next time I am going to show you the one system I left out of this video entirely on purpose. A way the old people stored up a whole winter's worth of water, without any tank at all, and without a single drop of it ever going bad, using nothing in the world but the deep cold of the ground and a quiet trick they simply stopped teaching after the war. I already have the old drawings for it laid out on my table. So go now and look up at your roof, and walk the length of your land, and go and find your water. And remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only now just starting to remember.